Dr. Glidden here, your steadfast advocate for health. One of my favorite quotes of all time, the guy that discovered quantum physics, Max Planck, said, "Science changes one funeral at a time." And what he meant was that the education of any type of a doctor, whether it's a PhD, an MD, or whatever, the intention of the educational process is to have the doctoral candidate think inside of a particular box, think inside of a particular methodology. And after the degree is granted, then the doctor now starts working around other doctors who are of the same point of view. Now, inside of a system of education like this, thinking outside of the box is not such a good idea. It's not rewarded, and it's not even thought about doing, right? So the tendency for medicine is the same tendency for other scientific disciplines. Doctors think inside of the box of what they were taught when they were in medical school, and even when they are confronted with new research, new evidence, which is contrary to what they were taught, they are loath to accept it. And psychologists refer to this tendency for the brain to not accept new information as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. It's the stress that the brain encounters when a new idea pops up which opposes previously held beliefs. Now, when you add this tendency for intellectual inertia and disinterest in change with the medical monopoly, you have unbelievably, well, you lay the foundation for unbelievably poor health outcomes. And that's exactly what's happened. Again, in 1912, the Congress of the United States gave the American Medical Association complete, utter, and total control over who could and who couldn't call themselves a doctor, and complete, utter, and total control over the soup to nuts of all medical education. So in 1912, the medical doctors were put into first place, and everybody else was kicked off of the bus of medicine. And since that time, it's been the MD way or the highway. And this happened so long ago that we've forgotten that this distinction even existed, and most people don't know that they have grown up inside of a medical monopoly. Right? This is where the term alternative medicine came from. It's quite frankly insulting. I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor, and I don't practice alternative medicine. I practice naturopathic medicine. Saying that what I and my colleagues do is alternative is like saying, well, the only real dog is a German Shepherd and every other dog is an alternative dog. Well, I don't think so. Nonetheless, you don't even know how to pronounce naturopathy, let alone know what it is. You have no idea what the training is. You have no idea what the skill set. Most people have no idea of this. And my profession, regretfully, amazingly, is only licensed and regulated in 24 states. Does that mean that the laws of nature and medicine change when you cross a state line? No. It's a political conversation. It's a turf war. And quite frankly, in the 21st century, it should be an artifact rather than the deal. But nonetheless, here we are. So again, I'm brought back to the Florida school shootings and the continuing national conversation. And, like many of my colleagues who are standing up, Jonathan Emord, constitutional lawyer Jonathan Emord amongst them, we need to take a long, hard look at the relationship between antidepressants and anti-psych meds on the behavior of people who take those medications. Here's a startling statistic. This from Harvard Medical School, 2011, 7 years ago. Harvard Medical School noted the astounding increase in the use of antidepressants by Americans. According to a report by the National Center for Health Statistics, the rate of antidepressant use in this country among teens and adults, people ages 12 and older, increased by 400% from 1988 to 2008. In the course of 10 years, increased 400%. Now look, thank God for Novocaine, thank God for the sterile technique, thank God for morphine when it's used correctly, thank God for Advil. It's not the drug, it's how it's used. It's not the gun, it's how it's used. But inside of the prevailing medical method, right, the conventional MD way of thought, if people are depressed, the ways that the MDs are trained to think about it is, well, you know, they have an antidepressant deficiency. This is the way that they're trained to think. Rarely is a medical doctor inclined to attempt to figure out the cause of the problem and develop a treatment to adjust the cause of the problem and eliminate the cause of the problem. They're trained to manage the symptoms with drugs. Some of these treatments more successful than others. But nonetheless, when there's an underlying problem with brain chemistry, in the case of somebody who has psychotic behavior or who is depressed, from the naturopathic point of view, from the holistic point of view, the antidepressant is the last thing to use. It's not the first thing to use. It's the last thing to use. But in the wonderful world of, you know, the Machiavellian medical monopoly that we live in, it's antidepressants, 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 psych meds, attention deficit disorder meds, right? And from my point of view as a licensed naturopathic doctor with 29 years of clinical experience, it's a dangerous method. It's a dangerous rut to get into. And yet, if you were to approach most trained medical doctors, they would tell you that I'm a quack, that they wouldn't really understand what my training is or what my license or what my therapeutics are, but because they weren't trained what I'm trained in, because they weren't trained what a chiropractor is trained in, because they weren't trained what an Ayurvedic practitioner, a traditional Chinese medical doctor, an acupuncturist is trained in, it must be inferior. That's how they think. And this is a problem. Because we're suffering as a society because of it. We need a free medical market, and I don't mean monetarily free. I mean we need equal access to all types of licensed and regulated medicine. We've needed this forever, and as time goes by, we need it more and more desperately. Because from my point of view, conventional medicine, fantastic. For trauma care, for surgery, when surgery is necessary, for infectious disease. But for the conditions that most people go to the doctor for most of the time, it's an old-fashioned, outdated, inappropriate methodology. Again, we need to bring the naturopath, the licensed naturopathic doctors to the table when we are discussing